Allah has given us a deen in which we have to take other people into consideration all the time. You have to be the best to your parents. You have to be the best to your spouse. Your children have rights over you. Your neighbor has rights over you. You have to say salam to your Muslim brother. You cannot just walk into somebody else's house hatta tasta'nisu, until you make yourself feel welcome, until it's a welcome time for you to go, an appropriate time for you to go. So consideration for other people and being mindful of other people is a huge part of our deen. It's a very, very big part of our deen. But there is a component of our deen in which you have to pretend nobody exists. Nobody matters. Not even my parents, not my loved ones. In fact, even my own personal feelings don't even matter. What is that one teaching in which no one else matters? Everybody else, you have to pretend nobody else exists. Allah Azza wa Jalla says, "Man ihtada فَإِنَّمَا يَهْتَدِي لِنَفْسِهِ." Whoever is going to commit to guidance is only doing so for their own benefit. You see, we have to take a lot of social matters into consideration when we make any other decision, even if you leave Islam on the side. When you are going to consider, for your son or your daughter, you're considering a proposal for marriage, you're looking at the family, you're looking at what this one's going to say, what that one's going to say. Are people going to raise a finger? What's our reputation going to be like? People consider social phenomena. What kind of gifts are we going to give? What kind of car should we get? What kind of neighborhood should we live in? What information should we tell people, not tell people? We're always thinking about the perception others are going to have of us, right? And it plays, for some people, it plays a huge part in virtually every decision that they make. Sometimes you have to make a decision and you think twice about what are my kids going to think? What is my wife going to think? What's the husband going to think? What are my parents going to think before I make this choice? Whether it's a financial decision, an education decision, any other kind of decision. But there's a certain set of decisions in which Allah has expected you and me to do something. Allah has decreed that certain kind of money is haram. And you already know what it is. You don't need an exhaustive explanation on what kind of earnings are haram. Allah has already explained certain kinds of food is haram. Allah has already made clear certain kinds of actions are haram. Certain kinds of environments are not acceptable. They violate this deen. So you and I already know, because the list of things that are prohibited is very small and is also very clear. There's no confusion about what's wrong in this deen. And everything that's wrong has been elaborated without any doubt. It's not complicated. And it's not complicated because this deen is supposed to be for all of humanity. So it's pretty straightforward. But sometimes our family, society, people's pressure, whatever it may be, other human beings start impacting our decision, and we start bending our commitment to what is right because it will offend someone else. So a scenario could be your family, your spouse wants you to do something that you know is haram. Now you have to think about it's going to hurt their feelings if you don't do it. But in those kinds of moments, the thing that Allah is teaching us, the mindset that Allah is teaching us is very powerful. I have to pretend that no one else is around. It's just me and Allah, and He expects me to live by certain kinds of guidance, and I'm going to do this entirely for myself. When I obey Allah, it is entirely selfish. It has nothing to do with anyone else. No one's feelings matter. No one's anger matters. My own preferences don't matter. My culture doesn't matter. What country I come from doesn't matter. Somebody's going to think I'm loyal. Somebody's going to think I'm disloyal. None of that. All of that gets erased because it's just me and Allah. It's just me and Allah. That's the only reason I'm following this guidance. That doesn't mean that I get to be ruthless and inconsiderate to others. But no one gets to compromise what I know to be right and wrong with my Rabb. And if somebody wants to get upset with me, well and good. Let them be upset. My Rabb is not angry with me. My Rabb is not upset with me. If Allah has given you a responsibility and He's given me a responsibility, I have to fulfill that responsibility no matter what anybody says, no matter what anybody else does. They all become completely irrelevant. This is part of the implications of man ihtada فَإِنَّمَا يَهْتَدِي لِنَفْسِهِ. But there are other implications. A lot of times, because we are now in this thought process, there's a fundamental problem. You can hate somebody all you want. You can even have valid criticisms of people that pretend to be religious. All of that's fine. And in many cases, I might even agree with you. But that's not the point. Anything that our deen that Allah tells you to do, if somebody else made you feel good or somebody else made you feel bad, It has nothing to do with you and your Rabb. Nothing. مَنِ اهْتَدَى فَإِنَّمَا يَهْتَدِي لِنَفْسِهِ. Whoever followed and committed themselves to guidance did so for their own self. No one else can be a part of your decision process. No one else. No scars from anyone else, no trauma from anyone else, no hurt feelings from anyone else. They don't matter because that's your relationship with another human being. This ayah is telling us that when it comes to Allah's guidance, every decision that has to do with Allah's revelation has to be separated from what people say and do, for better or for worse. Out of resentment or out of love, doesn't matter. They don't get to be part of that equation. So and then he says, وَمَنْ ضَلَّ فَإِنَّمَا يَضِلُّ عَلَيْهَا. He reinforces it. Because you don't have to actually reinforce. It could be itnab. You understand it from the first point. Whoever is committed to guidance is only doing so for themselves. By implication, you would know whoever wants to go the wrong way is only doing so to hurt themselves. They're only responsible for themselves. But Allah spells it out. Why is He spelling it out? Because people like to give an excuse. You know why I'm like this? Because of that person. Because of my brother, that's why I drink. Because of my uncle, that's why I do this, this, and this. There's a because of someone else, I disobey Allah. See that thought process? You get to point at somebody else and then justify not your relationship with them, but you get to justify your messed up relationship with Allah. And Allah removes this from the equation. He does not allow me to use anyone. Now, somebody hurt your feelings, that's valid. Somebody wronged you, that's valid. You know what's not valid? That you as a result get to disobey your Rabb. And if whoever wants to be misled that way, wants to hide behind that excuse, whoever wants to do that, before they come, what do you imagine is going to happen on Judgment Day? That you're going to come in front of Allah and say, Ya Allah, yeah, I know I had a drinking problem, but it's my cousin's fault. You know what he did to me. That's why I'm this way. It's his fault. It's her fault. It's my mom's fault. It's my aunt's fault. It's my friend's fault. It's my company's fault. They did this to me. They pushed me into this. You think Allah is going to just take your sin off of your head and put it on them? That's how Judgment Day works. وَمَنْ ضَلَّ فَإِنَّمَا يَضِلُّ عَلَيْهَا. And whoever has gone the wrong way, who's ever gone off the far end, they've only done so against their own selves. وَلَا تَزِرُ وَازِرَةٌ وِزْرَ أُخْرَى. And no one that carries any burden. Listen to these words. I pray you and I internalize these words. No one that carries any burden is going to be carrying the burden of anyone else. And by the way, in this ayah, Allah didn't say no human being will carry anybody else's burden. He said waziratun. Every nafs is called a wazira here. Why is that important? Allah is telling us in this ayah that every human being is fundamentally responsible. Fundamentally responsible. If there's young people in the audience today, I can tell you, if your parents never told you that you're responsible, if your parents never nagged you to pray or stay away from haram things and all that stuff, whether they do or not, whether you think that's annoying or not, whether they never said a single word to you, you're still responsible. I was telling you in the beginning, this was about the Israelites. The Israelites fell into all kinds of corruption and they blindly obeyed their corrupted leadership, their religious leadership. And they introduced new things into the religion that were never part of the religion. And they formed cults against one another. They did all kinds of misguided things. And Allah tells us later on that the vast majority of them have no knowledge what's in their book. وَمِنْهُمْ أُمِّيُّونَ لَا يَعْلَمُونَ الْكِتَابِ إِلَّا أَمَانِي وَإِنْهُمْ إِلَّا يَظُنُّونَ. Among them are unlettered people. They don't know except wishful thoughts about what their book actually says. They're just making assumptions. But even those people don't get to come in front of Allah on Judgment Day and say, well, the rabbi knew the book. I didn't have a degree in the Torah. That's why I didn't know what it says, and that's why I didn't follow it. It's his fault. He messed up the Saturday sermon. That's why that's why I get to get off the hook. These imams are messed up. These sheikhs are messed up. That's why I'm misguided. Just like you won't get to blame anyone else in your family or your friends, you won't get to blame anybody else who you think is more religious. People a lot of times they echo the sentiment online. It's because of these misguided scholars, or that's why the ummah is messed up. Good luck with that excuse on Judgment Day. Because Allah has made every single one of us, a carrier of our own burden. وَلَا تَزِرُ وَازِرَةٌ. This is a powerful, incredible teaching of our religion. You might think it's basic, but it's really incredible. You know what this does? It teaches us that Allah has made every human being intelligent enough, smart enough, capable enough to find the right way themselves. And when you're capable enough and smart enough, then you are held responsible. And what kind of hypocrisy is this? That the moment you turn 18, or even before, you want a driver's license. You're old enough and responsible enough to take other people's life in your hand on the road. You're responsible enough to stop at a red light and to not change lanes without looking, and all of that stuff, you're responsible enough. But when it comes to Allah's guidance, he's just a kid. He's just so young. It's not their fault. America, you know, American life, it messes you up. A life for the youth in the West. What nonsense is this? So many people hiding behind, oh, it's so much fitna living in the West. No, it's not. The whole world is the West now. What West? Where do you come up with this delusion that somehow it's harder to live in America, or really hard to live in Australia, or really hard to live in, it's easier to live in Pakistan? It's easier to live in Bangladesh? It's easier to live in Morocco? These fitan that are here are not there? This, if there's one kind of corruption there, there's another kind of corruption there. And much of it is the same now, thanks to the web. We're all caught in the same web, you know? So the idea that we get to blame society, blame the day and age, blame technology, blame other people, blame religious scholars, blame corruption, blame confusion, blame. And the only one you don't want to take responsibility for is yourself. This is the lie that Allah crushes. He crushes this lie. وَلَا تَزِرُ وَازِرَةٌ وِزْرَ أُخْرَى. No one that carries a burden, meaning every one of us are in fact carrying a burden, is going to be carrying the burden of anyone else. وَازِرَةٌ وِزْرَ أُخْرَى. وَمَا كُنَّا مُعَذِّبِينَ حَتَّى نَبْعَثَ رَسُولًا. And we would never be one to punish a people, to give any punishment until a messenger has been appointed, meaning until we appoint a messenger. Meaning Allah has now finally sent the messenger of Allah, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And now the thing that makes you worthy of Allah's rahmah, the guidance that makes it clear, what does it mean for you to live a good life, has been made clear. Now it's on you. قُلِ الْحَقُّ مِنْ رَبِّكُمْ فَمَنْ شَاءَ فَلْيُؤْمِنْ وَمَنْ شَاءَ فَلْيَكْفُرْ. Tell them just directly. The Prophet is told, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam used to cry over humanity. He used to be overwhelmed with grief that people aren't listening. فَلَعَلَّكَ بَاخِعٌ نَفْسَكَ عَلَىٰ آثَارِهِمْ. Same surah in Surah Al-Kahf, what did Allah tell him? قُلِ الْحَقُّ مِنْ رَبِّكُمْ. Tell them the truth comes from your master. Whoever wants, they can believe. Whoever wants, they should disbelieve. Go ahead, make your own choice. You and I are personally held responsible. On the one hand, Allah has rahmah. On the one hand, Allah is the guide. On the one hand, Allah protects. On the one hand, Allah overlooks our mistakes. But you know, the dangerous thing that people often don't talk about, you and I don't think about as Muslims, it's actually the greater danger for the Muslim is not a corruption in their actions, your sins. You're lying, you're cheating, you're doing something wrong. That's bad. But there's something much more dangerous when there's a corruption in your thought process, when your mind is corrupt, when the way you think about things is corrupt, when your worldview becomes corrupt, when you start thinking you can blame others and not yourself, when you start thinking you're somehow off the hook, Allah understands. You'll get to blame your emotional state for your actions. I'll get to just say, Ya Allah, I was in a really bad place. That's why I was doing that, and that's why I'm still doing it. Ya Allah, astaghfirullah al-azim, just one more drink. No. Because, it's her fault. So you could just turn to angels on the right and left. You're writing this for her, right? Not for me. This line of reasoning has to stop. This corrupt thinking is more dangerous than the sin itself. So he says, وَلَا تَزِرُ وَازِرَةٌ وِزْرَ أُخْرَى. Notice how many times this notion has been reinforced. First he said, مَنِ اهْتَدَى فَإِنَّمَا يَهْتَدِي لِنَفْسِهِ. That would have been enough. Then he said, وَمَنْ ضَلَّ فَإِنَّمَا يَضِلُّ عَلَيْهَا. Whoever is lost, then they're lost on their own account. They're only losing to their own peril. That's a second reinforcement. Then وَلَا تَزِرُ وَازِرَةٌ وِزْرَ أُخْرَى. Nobody who's carrying a burden will carry anybody else's burden. A third reinforcement. Why is he reinforcing this? By the way, the first statement means the same other two things. It's saying the same thing. If you really internalize the first statement, that your guidance depends on you, and you have to do so for your own benefit. Until you see that, then nothing else matters. That statement was enough. The other statements are reinforcement. Why does the Quran, full of wisdom, where there's no excess wording, why is it reinforcing so much? Because the thing that you and I overlook, the thing that I forget, that I tend to forget the most, Allah reinforces the most. The thing that's easily forgotten is the one that's hammered in more. That's why taqwa is talked about so much in the Quran. Over 200 times taqwa is being talked about. Why? Because you and I lose sight of it very quickly, right? So this is why this needs to be drilled in your head and mind. If you're, we enjoy a great deal of independence today that maybe the history of humanity has never seen. What do I mean by that? Even if you're like living at home with your parents or with family and you're not financially independent, you have a device that gives you access to the entire world and to virtually anything. You're constantly in a position to make whatever choice you want. With your mind, with your eyes, with your tongue, with your hands, you're able to make whatever choices you want. You have access to everything. And choice is a huge responsibility, but it doesn't feel that way when you don't see the consequences of your choices. When you just say whatever you feel like, you type up whatever you feel like, you blurt out whatever you feel like, you browse whatever you feel like. You don't feel like there's any consequence to your choices. I don't feel like it because it's split-second decisions. Quick hit of the endorphins, right? You just get a quick hit, you get a quick dopamine high, and then you move on to the next hit, right? And if we don't realize that this is going to lead us down a very dark path, a very terrible path in which guidance will be taken away from us. The people before us like to blame everybody else. The people before us did not take personal responsibility. The people before us had kind of a group thinking. All these people are like this, all these people are like this, or they had this defeated thinking about themselves. Oh, we're all messed up anyway. Now it's just if Allah forgives, He forgives. What can I do? If you pretend to be helpless, that's the last kind of trick in the Shaitan's book on this. If you're done blaming everyone else for your own misguidance, and you're lost all the candidates you could blame, then you come back to yourself and say, this is just who I am. What can I do? This is just how Allah made me. I can't help myself. Really? You can't help yourself. Allah made you incapable of carrying a burden. Is that what you're saying? He called you a wazira. He called you someone who can carry a burden, but you decide to call yourself someone who cannot carry a burden? When He says, لا تكلف نفس إلا وسعها, لا يكلف الله نفسا إلا وسعها, Allah does not burden anyone except they can hold it, they can carry it. He made me responsible. He made you responsible. If no one else ever told you that you are responsible, the fact that Allah revealed it is enough. And if we pretend we never heard about this, and we never realized it, and we never lived by it, you can live for pretend only so long until you have to stand in front of Allah and explain yourself. That's why this ayah, as I leave you, this ayah is ayah number 15. Look at what Allah says in the ayah right before it, actually. Right before it. اقرأ كتابك كفى بنفسك اليوم عليك حسيبا. The ayah right before it was Judgment Day. And on Judgment Day, a person is being told to open up the record of their own life, everything they did. And Allah is telling this person, اقرأ كتابك, read your own book. Read your own book. This is what you did. كفى بنفسك اليوم عليك حسيبا. Today you are enough as an accountant, as an auditor against yourself. You are enough as an auditor against yourself. That's what Allah is saying to every human being on Judgment Day that forgot this teaching. And when you're shaken by those words, like, I'm going to be shown everything I did, and I'm going to account for everything I did, then the very next ayah says, this is how you protect yourself from that day. Take guidance for your own self. Become selfish when it comes to guidance. Become scrupulous, uncompromising when it comes to Allah's guidance. It doesn't matter who gets hurt. It doesn't matter what pains you have to go through. It's worth the pain now. It's worth the energy exhaustion now. It's worth losing the friends now. It's worth being called the names now. It is not worth what you're going to be facing then. All the people whose loyalty makes you compromise Allah's guidance will be running away from you and me on Judgment Day. I don't want to be fooled by those kinds of loyalties. And all those people who I did not listen to, and I followed Allah's guidance, and they hated me for it, you might find that they're thanking me for it on Judgment Day. Thank you for not listening to me. Thank you for making me upset. Because if you hadn't done so, I would have been in deeper trouble. I would have been in deeper trouble. So I pray that Allah makes us deeply, internally, personally responsible. He removes from us the tendency to cast blame on everyone else for the way that we are before we put responsibility and blame on ourselves. And when we do blame ourselves, we don't become hopeless. We are still capable. We did not become paralyzed because of our past mistakes. We are still capable. If we were no good and there's no chance for you to redeem yourself, then there's no reason for Allah to keep you alive. There's no reason. The fact that you and I are breathing means Allah has given us an opportunity to redeem ourselves. The fact that we wake up this morning means Allah sees something good in us, the potential of good in us. Whether you want to realize that or not, or declare yourself doomed, that's up to you. That lie, is only to your own peril. May Allah Azza wa Jal make us real with ourselves and those around us, and may Allah make our commitment to His guidance sincere and pure, and may Allah Azza wa Jal help us live a life that embodies this beautiful ayah of the Quran.